We are thrilled to have Jen with us today. Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to let us get to know you a little bit better and learn some more fun things about you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Regina. I'm excited and I always get a little nervous at times like this. So I try not to stumble on my tongue too much.
You just joined the library, what, 3.5 months ago? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before you came and became the state librarian?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I actually lived in Minnesota or Wisconsin for about 35 years. I did my grad work at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then moved to Minneapolis and worked at the Minneapolis Public Library, which is a research library, somewhat like the State Library and Information Center here in New Jersey, and did a whole range of different jobs when I worked in Minneapolis and at the Hennepin Library, everything from a children's librarian to a fee-based information researcher to government documents to electronic resources to partnerships to digital inclusion. So sort of a wide range of things over the years, which makes sense over almost 30 years. That kind of accounts for it. At the same time, I was raising two kids, so I have two young men. I guess they are now. They're not kids anymore, but as a mom, they always stay kids. I'm pleased to say that my older son, they're both in graduate school, but my older son is also an athlete with a disability, and he just qualified for the U.S. Paralympic team. So he's going to Tokyo coming up here in August. So I'm really super excited for him. Will be his third games. So I'm excited about that. So a lot of my life has revolved around my kids and helping them get to be the wonderful young men that they are. Let's see. And then before that, I grew up actually outside Buffalo, New York, and lived there while I went to college and stuff. So then moved to the Midwest and was really excited to have an opportunity to come back to the East Coast. So when this job opened up, I kind of jumped at it.
Well, that's wonderful. And congratulations to your son for going to the Olympics 4 times. If you don't mind, what sport does he play?
He plays a sport called wheelchair rugby. There's a documentary called Murder Ball that you may have heard of that was on the US 2014. It was an Oscar contender back in the day. So it's really a fun movie and really does the sport justice. So encourage folks to watch that. And NBC is going to be actually televising quite a bit of the Paralympics this year, which I think the coverage doesn't come close to what they offer for the regular Olympics, but they'll be broadcasting a lot. And I'm going to look forward to, I can't go to Tokyo because they're banned on international visitors, but I look forward to watching them online and seeing the games and hopefully win gold.
Well, we can only hope.
Yeah.
I think that's so awesome that you get to support someone in the Olympics this year. That's really great. So can you tell us a little bit about what interested you in becoming state librarian? And when you saw the job, did you have any goals or plans that you thought you would like to try as you were interviewing and as you were coming in?
Yeah, I think, I tried to learn a lot about the New Jersey State Library before I came. So I had a little sense of what I was kind of getting my feet into. It's a beautiful opportunity because it's such a well-organized institution with such talented staff. So I was really walking into a win-win situation. Continuing the status quo would be just fine because things are going wonderfully well and staff are doing a great job at the various roles that we have at the library. I think as I looked at what we offer and how we do things, the one thing that seemed to be missing to me is work related to digital literacy and digital equity. That's one thing a lot of states have taken some steps toward working through their libraries in that area. So I'm looking forward. That was sort of my initial thought was, wow, there probably is room for something along those lines. And so we're pursuing that and seeing where we can get with that.
And now that you've been here for a few months, do you have kind of a better sense of things that you would like to do and accomplish as state librarian?
I think we just started a strategic planning process, and that for me is really where it's at. I really want to hear what our staff who've been around, some people for a long time, some people not all that long, really hear from them what our direction is. We actually have 3 areas in the state library. We've got our Talking Book and Braille Center. We've got our Library and Information Center, and then we have a unit we call Library Development. And each of them operates pretty autonomously, but using the strategic planning process, I'm hoping that we can get some commonalities across those 3 areas and really point our ship in a singular direction that'll benefit New Jerseyans.
What has been your favorite part about being at the state library thus far?
I think it would have to be the staff. I've been really impressed with both the personal welcomes that I've had, as well as the professional experience I've had with people on staff. So that's been an absolute pleasure. I haven't had a bad experience yet and don't expect to. So I've really enjoyed getting to meet people, and I do the weekly or bi-weekly staff meetings, and that's been a nice opportunity to get to know people a little bit. So I appreciate people's indulgence of my interest in doing that, because I think it helps all of us to get to know each other a little bit better as well.
I need to rave at you at the staff meeting about the staff meetings. They are so awesome and they're so much fun. I have enjoyed every single staff meeting that I've attended, and I've enjoyed so much hearing what people are working on. So I'm really grateful to you for instituting that for NJSL, because it's really cool and really neat to hear about what people are doing. And also I wanted to say, I absolutely agree with you. I think that the staff makes this job. It really does. It was amazing. For Edison Day, I got to participate in a panel, and it amazed me, between TSU and NJSL, like all I heard were people raving about their coworkers and how awesome they are. And I love that about our community. It's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, what we've seen over the last few months, that I've noticed, at least since you've come in, there has been a lot more collaboration and unity between the TESU and the NJSL communities. We were kind of separate but equal before, but we've been collaborating a lot more. In that vein, we are the university library for Thomas Edison State University, in addition to being the library for state employees. How can the state library best serve the TESU community, including staff that work there and students as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to do is really get to know our colleagues at TESU, which I think has been some of the efforts that have happened over the last several months, have been about getting to know one another. So to really hear what their needs and interests are. I think the presentations and NJSL Presents workshops that we do are a great opportunity for TESU faculty and staff and students to, engage in something kind of fun, a little bit lighthearted most times. And I think that as we get to know our colleagues at Thomas Edison, I think really putting ourselves there as librarians, and not just, who serve people who are doing reference work for their classes or something, but for the life skills and the things that we need to be successful in life, to where to find out. One example would be the emergency broadband benefit. That's something we can help out with. Hopefully, staff don't need that, but that's of interest. We can help people learn about that. There are all sorts of things that have to do with the conduct of life, I think, that librarians are skilled in knowing about, that we can really bring to it. And then certainly to bring our awareness of information literacy, I think, is really a big thing, particularly for students, to understand, better understand the nature of communication that's happening in the world today, and what's reliable and what's not. So I think there's just tons and tons of opportunity. I'd I'd love to see us have a librarian that worked between TESU and the State Library that could really communicate and help us understand what some of the needs are that we're not seeing right off the bat, and to be a liaison with mentors, and that I think would be awesome. So I might have mentioned it once or twice to Dr. Hancock that it might be a nice thing to do.
And could I ask, kind of circling back to question number 2, in terms of the TSU community, you mentioned that you were particularly interested in developing more digital literacy initiatives. Do you think that that would directly pertain to TSU and what we could do, especially since they're in an online learning environment?
Yeah, I think I would admit to not knowing enough about the student body to having a good answer to that. My gut sense is yes, there's an opportunity to help people engage at a deeper level with the tools of technology. And I think we're perfectly poised to be able to do that. There's some wonderful tools and resources out there that we can direct people to and help people learn to use, and to really make the best use out of the technology and the digital resources that we have available. So there's certainly an opportunity for that, but I don't know specifically what it would look like because I'm not familiar enough with the student body.
Okay. And what are some of your upcoming goals, do you think, projects or initiatives that right now you are incredibly excited about? And
Sure, yeah, a couple of different things come to mind. One, we have our Library Construction Bond Act, and we have a grant opportunity open right now, and that's been really fun to work with our colleagues at the Attorney General's office, the Treasury office, the Governor's office, Educational Finance Facilities Authority. So I've really enjoyed working with that particular project and getting things up and running. So our applications, I think, are due June 4th. So the deadline's coming up pretty quick here. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of applications we get, and learning more about the projects that are out there. We also received what I kind of sometimes call a boatload of money through the American Recovery Plan Act. And that I'm excited about. We've got a literacy related project we're working on as a state agency, but we also are giving out a good amount of that in competitive grants to our local libraries. And that probably excites me the most, of being able to get resources into the hands of people who need it and who can use it well. Some of the projects that I've heard about coming forward for that funding are really fun. Retrofitting a van to be a mobile lab, mobile technology lab, a book bike, putting laptops and that in a big book cart. So there's just some wonderful ideas out there, and I love that we're able to support those, and then to champion the role of libraries by demonstrating and showing people across the state what's happening in libraries that they need to know about.
I need to tell you a very brief story that's relevant to what you just said about mobile stuff. In addition to my work as the genealogy librarian, I'm also responsible for the New Jersey State Library Archives, which is a bunch of old papers dating back years and years and years. And probably one of our most successful and politically savvy state librarians was a man named Roger McDonough, who actually oversaw the construction of our current building. And one of the things that he did was he planned for the tricentennial anniversary of the birth of the state of New Jersey. So this would have been in the mid 1960s. And he partnered with the New Jersey Historical Commission and the New Jersey Historical Society. And all three men in charge of those organizations were all Irish, and they used to call themselves the Irish Mafia. And they put together a mobile New Jersey history program that was wildly successful. They took it all around the state, and they created a real passion and interest for the tricentennial. And in addition, and that carried over 10 years later to the celebration of the bicentennial of the United States as well. So we've seen how powerful and effective mobile programs are. So it's really neat and interesting that we have money coming in to do something similar. And I hope it's just as successful as their initiatives were.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I think libraries have been given a gift with our Recovery Plan Act funds, and we really need to be mindful and judicious about how we're using it to really demonstrate how valuable libraries are and what a difference they make in communities. And it's fun being a small part of that. And the latest thing I've been able to do is go to groundbreakings for new construction projects. So that's been pretty fun as well to, literally get in the dirt. So I've been enjoying that. And of course, that gives me an opportunity to see the state too, which I'm enjoying.
Wonderful. So we have one final question, and then we're going to open things up for audience question. We've spent the last 15 months in this fun little pandemic we've been having. Do you have any feelings on how the profession of librarianship has changed as a result of the pandemic? And do you think that these changes are temporary? Are they permanent? And how will they affect how we serve our patrons and our communities?
That's a great question, Regina. I go in lots of different directions. As you say one statement, I go in one direction, then you follow it up and I'm going in another direction. So I think there's, for public libraries in particular, they've really had to adapt to the climate. So doing a lot of virtual programs, doing curbside pickup and that sort of thing. So I think those will continue. I don't see those changing, and the skills that go along with particularly working virtually, I think are with us to stay. I think what's going to be challenging is libraries where a lot of staff really are invested in working from home. I could see some potential challenges with staffing buildings, depending on how it goes, or with unsatisfied staff. That could be the other thing that happens. But I think libraries have a keener awareness of the need for partnerships and need to work with community rather than for it, but to work together with it. So I'd like to think that change will stay, because that's really kind of almost the bread and butter for a library to be successful, is to be a well-recognized and well-supported member of the community that it's part of. So, but yeah, I think some of the changes are here to stay. Some of them will be gone. I'd like to think that the plexiglass shields and the physical items like that won't last forever, but you also get in the habit, and we've already invested in putting them in. One of the libraries in Minnesota, they had 32 branches. They bought literally a ton of plexiglass. And that just astounded me, but that's how much they needed for their branches. So I can't imagine that they're going to take those down anytime soon because of what they've invested in them. So, and I'm sure there are libraries similar to that here in New Jersey.
Well, wonderful. All right, everybody. We are going to open the floor up to questions. Please post your questions in chat. Lee is going to moderate the Q&A in chat. Lee, I'll let you use your discretion if you would like people to unmute to ask questions, or you would prefer people to just post in chat.
We do have one question that was posted in chat. So if you have any questions, now's a good time. Just put them in the chat. And then if we need you to explain, you can always unmute yourself. So Gabriella Kaplan asked, what do you say to students or people who say books are dead?
I say it politely, but I say you're wrong. Really, there's never been a greater need for information, more than there is today. And I don't make a distinction between electronic books and digital books and print books. It's all the same. It's all information. So I think of books as tools, and the digital revolution changes the tool that we use, but what we're doing with it is still there, and books will never be outdated. There'll always be a need, even if it's only a manual for using your iPhone or whatever. There's always a need for that. So yeah, I politely tell them and point out, book sales are continue to rise. They're not going anywhere, and people enjoy reading, and it's key to literacy. And I don't know if anybody here's read children's books recently or picture books, but it's one of the best things you can do for your mood is to read a good picture book. It's like just a blessing to be able to do that.
I used to be a school librarian, children's librarian. So I love reading picture books and reading books out loud. So I completely agree with you there. So Sharon Rawlings asked, Jen, what is your idea of the ideal day off? So this is more getting to know you type of question.
Sure. So it has coffee involved, and nice cup of coffee. I do some writing on the side. So a great day for me is being able to spend a couple of hours just writing and working on a writing project that I have going on. And then spending time with friends and having a nice meal, ideally out or at somebody's house. So it's been a little harder to come by here in New Jersey since I just moved here and we've got a pandemic going on, but that's kind of an ideal day for me, of really being able to spend time with friends and do the writing. That means a lot to me.
Yes, hopefully as things open up, you can experience that more. Fingers crossed. Pat asked, we're in between the New Jersey Devils and the Philadelphia Flyers, and she wants to know, do you have an alliance between either of those teams or another hockey alliance?
My embarrassment would be to say, what sport is that?
Hockey.
In hockey. And with hockey, I go to college hockey, so the Badgers are the team to beat. But I'm not a huge fan of professional hockey, but my kids are both real sports fanatics, so I get indoctrinated to Minnesota teams. I've called on to root for the hometown teams in Minnesota.
All right, I'm just checking to see if we have any more questions coming in. Oh, all right, we got one from Alicia. Do you have any plans for any upcoming projects that involve research writing from the students, manager, or executive perspective? Based on your history with grant writing and information studies, this would be a great initiative or project. Sorry, it was a little bit long.
Yeah, I have a personal project that I'm working on that's around leadership and mental health. So that, and looking at issues related to that, that's a topic that's very close to my heart. And really doing some writing about that has been really a positive experience. Actually, I have a coach that I'm working with on doing some of that writing and leadership development. I think that's a great idea, Alicia, and I'll be continuing to refine the work that I'm working on. I find every 3 or 4 weeks the focus changes slightly, so I think I'm going to end up there sooner rather than later.
So that is all the questions that I've seen in the chat. If anybody has any other questions, they can always unmute themselves and ask. Otherwise, I'm going to pass it over to Regina.
And actually, if you don't mind, I just wanted to take a minute. One of the topics that's really important to me is equity, diversity, and inclusion. And today is May 25th, and it was 1 year ago that George Floyd was murdered by the Minneapolis police. And I just wanted to make a note of that. I think was a lot of energy around Black Lives Matter and some of the protests and that were happening. And a year on, I don't want us to forget that a man gave his life or was forced to give his life. And we have a long way to go in our society for rectifying racism. And I hope that the New Jersey State Library can be an instrument in healing that. That's my preaching for the day.
Jen, do you have any DEI or EDI plans or projects upcoming that you'd like to share with us? Anything that you're working on?
So the work that I've been doing with that are two things. One, with the strategic planning process that we're engaged in now at the State Library, the equity, diversity, inclusion is part and parcel of that. The fellows that are consultants that we're working with that have their feet rooted in social justice. So that will be feature of the plan, both as its own kind of thread as well as throughout the plan, really an eye toward how can we increase and improve ourselves as an institution to resolving some of these societal ills. So that's one thing. The second thing, I serve as, there's an organization called the Chief Officers of State Library Agencies. So it's all the 50 state librarians have an association, which is kind of goofy, but we have an equity and inclusion group there. And one of the things we did over the last year and a half was develop an equity statement with a set of core competencies and maturity models. So what we're really doing for that is looking at the business of the organization with an equity, diversity, inclusion lens to figure out where are we? You know, are we doing a good job? Where's our room for improvement? What would it look like to improve the work that we're doing and that kind of thing? So I've been working on that. And as I get further with that, I'll be bringing that back to the state library as I've got information and we get to various places with it. Because I think it's one thing to write a statement, but it's another thing to take action. And I've done a lot of work with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity in Minnesota and really looked at how we can use their model for government change and institutional change. So my hope would be to continue some of that here, particularly once we get our initial planning process done and be able to move into that direction. I know we have a diversity and inclusion committee at the state library, and I'd love to beef that up a little bit and see how we can better support that part of the agency to do some impactful work for both staff as well as our patrons.
We do have one question that came through chat. Oh, and another one. So the first one is from Gabrielle again. She wants to know, what's your favorite fiction book or writer?
Fiction book or writer? Boy, that is a great question. And I've been reading a lot of poetry lately. So poetry is what comes to mind, more so than fiction. In fact, it's been such a while since I've read any fiction. And I always go to children's authors, interestingly enough. So I would say Chris Van Allsburg, is my favorite picture book writer. In terms of poets, Mary Oliver has been the one that I've been reading a lot. And with fiction, I think, I don't pronounce the name correctly, but Haruki Murakami is a Japanese writer, has written some really interesting fiction books that just are a little bit surreal and a little bit real, that kind of realistic, non-realistic fiction. So I guess I would say Murakami is probably my favorite at the moment.
Children's books count too as fiction.
Once a children's librarian, always a children's librarian.
Yeah. So Cynthia is asking, does the diversity, equity, and inclusion group have any ideas on how to deal with inequity of pay for information science grads between librarians and other information jobs?
Boy, that's a great question. I think the conversation that I'm hearing happen more so than the pay is the need for the degree. To what degree is an accredited master's degree actually have value and add value to librarians? So I know New Jersey has certification, which is different than Minnesota, but I think our conversations have really been around the value of that library degree and how can, if we want to diversify the profession and get a larger number of people of color to be on, one stream of thought says, well, we'll send people to library school. And the truth is we've been doing that for 25 or 30 years, and it hasn't really made a dent in the percentage of people of color that are particularly in leadership positions in libraries. And where you find the diversity coming in is in the so-called non-professional or paraprofessional jobs. So my thinking is, why do we need to specify the library degree when there are people out there that have skills and tools and knowledge that libraries benefit from that don't have the degree, but that can help with community building and partnerships and working with to serve community needs, that maybe the degree itself is a little bit overrated. But I well recognize that other people would vehemently disagree with me. So you know, and I'm privileged. I guess that's the other thing that I would say is I'm aware that I'm privileged, and I went to library school many, many years ago, and I have had the benefit of having a degree for so long. I almost forget that I have it, but I have some concerns about the quality of library education and what's being taught in library schools. And I think until we get that under wraps and figured out, we can't really have the conversation about pay equity. My personal approach.
It's definitely a complex topic, lots of factors. I do not see any more questions in the chat. So again, if anybody has any, they can put in the chat or they can open it up and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Alicia. How are you? How is everybody again? I just have one quick question, maybe from the university perspective. I work with student advising and our academic standing with helping students stay on track to degree completion. And in my history of working in these departments, a lot of students struggle with the writing aspect of completing their degree. Writing is very different for colleges and university than it is for work. Do you have any thoughts, or do you have any plans or initiatives on how to beef up the websites in that area to help our students? Because we have some really bright students. Sometimes, you know, they just need a little bit more help. And I think just listening to you, have so much experience with so many, you were so well-rounded. I just love the conversation we had today. And I just know that there is some way we can help our students just a little bit more so we can raise the level of their writing or however it really looks on the education side.
Yeah, Alicia, for me, it starts with reading. I know the people who are the best writers are people who read a lot. That I think is something that we really need to be encouraging people to do. And as Lee said, children's books count. You know, any book does. So getting people interested in reading for pleasure and not just for work or school purposes, I think goes a long way to helping them feel comfortable with writing and giving them examples. Because I think a lot of times people don't know what writing can look like because they don't read a lot. So they don't know that, you know, Mark Twain or Charles Dickens actually is one of the most wordy authors you could imagine. And, you know, he writes sentences that go on for close to a paragraph. And well, that's one style of writing, but it's not necessarily one you want to replicate in your own work. Somebody else is pointing in the chat box to libraries do writing programs. There's an organization called the National Writing Project that does work with people, as well as the, oh gosh, it's NaNoWriMo. So the National November Writing Month, where there's sort of a community effort to get people to write every day during the month of November, to write novels, to put it there. Adult summer reading programs are also out there. But I think also it really, people need, that's presumptuous of me to say, people benefit from having somebody that can read their work. That was the class that I taught on proposals and grants. What the students appreciated the most was being able to get that one-on-one feedback that helps them understand where their writing suffers and where it can be improved, because people don't know what they don't know. And to have somebody tell them that in a nice way, respectful way, I think is really a gift that we can give them. So the extent we can get good tutors out there, I think would be fabulous. And I would say most librarians that I've met are pretty good writers, but not everyone's comfortable with it. So it's really that nice mix of somebody who's got the talent as well as the comfort with it to be successful.
Yes, there's a lot of great suggestions in the chat. So I encourage you, if you haven't looked at the chat, make sure you're reading that.
Thank you.
I personally benefited from the Writing Center at my university. and the technical writing class that I took that was required by my degree. So I just throwing that out there, having classes specifically on writing and how you go about it instead of just incorporating them into your whatever degree class that you have is valuable too. I don't.
I was going to say, Piscataway Public Library has a huge program for adult literacy that includes writing work and math literacy as well. So it's not just like English as a second language. It's a true literacy program. I know about it through, I took Mimi's literacy boot camp, our Mimi, the New Jersey State Library. Mimi runs a literacy boot camp when I was a public librarian. And it was an amazing program, Mimi's program, and what they're doing at Piscataway is amazing too. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, Plainfield Public Library is doing some good work in that area as well. Yeah. Yeah, my kids both like to write, and I like to think it's because they read since, they've been read to since they were born, literally. And, that comfort with the written word is something that you can't take for granted, because not everybody has that. If you have a parent who's not comfortable with reading, they're going to be challenged to help their child appreciate reading and enjoy it. So I think the more that we can get people enjoying whatever kind of book, or whatever kind of reading, magazines, that cereal boxes, whatever, is a good thing. Yeah, and audiobooks too, Lee. You're absolutely right about that.
Okay, Regina, I think we are all set with questions from the chat.
All right, wonderful. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and contributing to the discussion. I think it's fantastic what the conversation, Alicia's question just generated. Somebody noted in the chat, I just want to mention out loud that BrainFuse, one of the online programs, does specifically have writing help for higher education students as well. So if a local public library subscribes to that, I don't think that's one of our Jersey Clicks databases. And I don't think it's one of the databases that we subscribe to at the state library, but somebody could always check with their local public library, because I know at Thomas Edison, we have students from all over the country. So they might not be in New Jersey necessarily, but your public library can be a fantastic resource and supplement to the services that the state library offers as well. Oh, and Kathleen says that we do have BrainFuse for all New Jersey public libraries. So that's wonderful. Yeah. So that might be available via Jersey Clicks as well. So we have tons of great suggestions in the chat. That's something that will be, if anybody wants to quickly go on and take a look at that before we end, I will ramble on and thank Jen for a few minutes so everybody has time to look at the chat. Jen, I just want to thank you so much for letting us get to know you a little bit. I'm like I said, it's been a pleasure so far working with you. We've really enjoyed having you here so far. And we want to welcome you to the community. And we're really happy, in addition, to have you as a member of the WPN. And we really hope that you enjoy being part of the Women's Professional Network, and you enjoy our programs and services, and that you consider getting involved in some of our committees and some other stuff that we do, because we would love to have you. We would love to have you and your work ethic and your interesting projects and backgrounds to help us out a little bit as well.
I'd be happy to do that, Regina. I look forward to the opportunities. And I also should say that my general principle in life is an open door principle. So feel free to reach out if you have questions. If you don't know where to look for something, I'm kind of a librarian at heart. So I answer questions, and I actually answer questions that don't get asked. So you always want to be careful when we're having a conversation, because I might start telling you things you didn't actually care about. Always looking for feedback and opportunities to be of service to people in the community.